Hey, deserving listeners. In this episode, I'm going to comment on your comments from my videos from the past couple weeks. This first video is Love is Blind number 90, Bean Dip Analysis, in which I rewatched that scene. The YouTube user called My Breakdown says, "Can we get a full episode where Dr. Honda learns from Urban Dictionary and teaches us?" Yeah, it's kind of the theme this season. FR6 says, "In the past, we didn't use the term bean dip, but this was a thing in my 6th grade class. The point of it was to humiliate a girl who was developing earlier than others, preferably to humiliate her in front of her peers. I've never seen it in any other context, certainly not with adults." Yeah, yikes. Gray says, "I appreciate you calling out the dehumanization and over-sexualizing of black women. I also appreciated what you said about there not being a perfect way to deal with it as a victim." Yeah, well, not to repeat myself, but I will, in that when this sort of thing happens in public, there's no good answer. You can either confront it, which of course you deserve to do, but it's not going to go over well, even with allies potentially, because no one knows what to do and no one wants to rock the boat, that kind of thing. Or you can grin and bear it and act like everything's fine and let that sort of thing happen more. Neither option is good, right? And then Gray also says, "I also laughed at your comment on the double-barreled bean dip." Yeah. Member Zawadi says, "I know I'm such a nerd for this, but I'd love to see how you organize your notes sometime, Dr. Honda. You always seem to be able to access what you need so quickly, despite there being so many potential ways to splice the data. I love a well-structured system." Well, YouTube member Zawadi, I won't go into boring detail, but I'll talk off the top of my head. Yeah, as a professor, as a therapist, and as a podcaster, I have always tried to have a quick reference system, because when I will do literature reviews or research reviews, or I learn something new, I will want that at the ready, because I know from experience that years later, or even months later, I will have forgotten. And I don't want to have to go through the same process all over again. I don't want to have to do the Googling and read the books and read all the research and talk to experts and think about it. I just want a quick reference that is in my words and is tailored to me. And so I've always had that system, or I've had that system for a long time now, maybe 20 years, maybe longer. And when I became a podcaster, it was important for me to do it more rigorously and in a more systematic way, because as a podcaster, I'm asked a lot of questions spanning the entire spectrum of psychology and sociology and anthropology and culture and everything. And I will do a lot of research, and I'll look up a lot of things, and I'll take notes, and I'll think about it. And I also want to be able to find it years later, right? So I make sure that I name the file well, so that I will intuitively search for that term. Also, I use Google Docs, which helps because the search will prioritize based on likelihood of what I'm looking for, that kind of thing. I also will title some of the more important documents in bold to catch my eye. And I have different systems of organizing the notes into different folders. So I always want that. I also have periodically gone through my notes and consolidated, because, when I first do a pass on the literature review and on my own thinking, the notes might be 100 pages long. It's not very quick reference, right? So I will spend time going through all the notes and making a new system, a new note that is what I call short notes, meaning that it's a condensed version of it. And it's a very satisfying thing for me to do. And I know people, some of you, or I don't know, but people have asked for these notes. Oh, I'd love to see those notes. I can never share those because they have personal reflections in them. They have client information in them sometimes, or coded client information. They're also not referenced exactly the way you're supposed to reference things in APA, and so I can never share them. But yeah, I do that. And I want to spend this year of 2024 actually getting even more notes organized even better because that has been on my list for 5-10 years, and I might have time finally this year to tackle all of that. Love is Blind, number 91, confronting Trevor during the reunion. Oxy Susie says, Dr. Honda, I have waited for your comment on Trevor since I watched the reunion. You ask for your deserving listeners' opinion, so here's mine. Yeah, I was during the reunion, I was saying that it's possible that Trevor is telling the truth. I was also saying it's possible that he's lying through his teeth, and I predicted that my sympathetic narrative, which I don't know if it's true, but I just offered it up as a possibility. I was wondering if anyone else believed that to be a possibility. None of us know if Trevor is telling the truth or not, because all the data that says he's lying is from other people who could also be lying, or they could all be lying, or they could all be telling the truth, but the story is different. If you've ever heard two people in argument with each other tell you their version of the story, their Rashomon version, and you're like, I was there, both of you are right, but you're spinning things in this very oppositional way. So, it's just normal that happens. Like I said, it's possible that Trevor is truly a monster, honestly. I pointed that out, that's a possibility. But anyway, so I asked everyone what they thought. Oxy Susie says that, Trevor appears pretty authentic to me. He apologized and appeared remorseful to me. Yes, he could be lying and acting, but that does not seem very likely to me. The way he was treated in the reunion was hard for me to watch, and I felt bad for him. Yeah, just chiming in here, I don't necessarily feel that bad for him because he dug his own grave there. So I don't know if I feel bad for him. I feel bad for him if people assume that 100% he is lying, because I don't think that's fair to him. But given what he did, I think he deserved to be raked over the coals, at least to some extent, the way that he did. And I thought that actually the cast and the hosts were respectful of him. They didn't really jump down his throat. They listened. They let him talk, which isn't always the case. So I didn't feel particularly bad for him. But I do think it's possible he was telling the truth. I also think it's possible he's lying through his teeth. Going on, Oxy Susie says, and I was tarred and feathered for voicing this opinion about Trevor. So I appreciate your differentiated view, which is what I have been eagerly expecting. So thank you. Yeah, everyone's entitled to their opinion. No one should be tarred and feathered. I mean, it's not like this is some kind of major thing that we need to be fighting with each other about. It's just Trevor and this other person and Chelsea seemed to be moving on. So, and Chelsea didn't pick him. So yeah. Now, I will say that it's very likely that when people are very passionate about these points of view and will fight with each other online, it's because they identify with one or the other person. There have obviously been people who have been mistreated by someone who presents like Trevor, right? And if Trevor is looking like he might be lying and some people are defending him, it can feel to us when we're watching that other people are validating that person in our past who harmed us. But that isn't actually what's happening. But we all will transfer and displace, but we want to be aware of that. We want to point our anger and our healing in the direction that is in our heart, not towards displacement objects. Also, there are people who have been in Trevor's shoes, who have been in very messy relationships and have been unfairly judged and criticized for that, and so they might stick up for the Trevor person in that equation. Lance says, supposedly Trevor threatened to release sex tapes to her kid if she ever went public. This is what completely changed my mind about him. Wait, what? So how do we know this to be true? I'm guessing that the other woman came forward with that. If that's true, yeah, wow. He threatened to release sex tapes. So I assume that's Trevor threatened to release video of him having sex with that other woman who leaked those texts, and he was going to release the sex video to her child if she ever went public, which is yikes. Wow. If that's true, yeah, that's evil. That's now, it sounds like a complicated relationship, even if we don't believe him, even if we believe everything that she's saying. So it's hard to know the full picture. But yeah, I mean, if that's true, that's certainly something to say. But, the analogy that I will use sometimes, and others will use this too, is that you go to a baseball game and you don't have a ticket, so you have to watch the game through the fence in the outfield through a tiny little hole. And you see there's a play at home plate, and you're like, he missed the tag. If you understand baseball, you understand that it's ridiculous to think that you, from the outfield, through a tiny little hole in the fence, would be able to see whether or not someone missed the tag at home plate. That's what we're doing when we're watching these shows. We're watching a very complex story through a tiny little hole in a fence that's yards and meters and meters from the action. So for us to make any kind of call or firm statement about what happened and what didn't happen is really quite silly. That's my opinion. And as someone that treats actual humans in my office, I can tell you from experience that even when I'm right there at home plate, I'm the umpire, that I'll miss things too, as evidenced by I'll have a client for 5-10 years, and then some major revelation will come forward that will completely revolutionize my conception of the individual. I could give you specific examples, but it would reveal too much, so I won't do that. But anyway. Yeah, and there were also a lot of comments on this episode because I asked for everyone's opinion. The vast majority of people were saying, no, I don't believe Trevor at all. I think he's a horrible person, which, yeah, I think there's certainly a lot of evidence of that, even if we go off what he was saying, honestly. Love's Blind number 93, Clay made me cry in this video. Alicia says, Dr. Honda, I want to relieve your stress over the potential smelliness with the no socks with the current dress shoe trend. Right, so I was talking about the no socks thing. This look is really popular among my age group. However, to clarify, they are wearing socks. They are wearing what is called no-show socks. The rest of the sock is below the ankle bone. I'm not a fan of the look personally, but it's not smelly, haha. Huh. Well, do they migrate underneath the foot? Because there was a trend in the 80s of runner's socks, is what we called them. And I tried them out, and they, after maybe an hour of wearing them and walking around, the heel, it would start to move underneath my foot, and I'd have to pull them up all the time. Do they do that? Plus, why not just wear socks? I don't know. Who cares? Morgan says, it's clear that American society often fails to extend grace and empathy towards black men and boys, right? So this is the episode with Clay and with Brett. So Morgan says, it's clear that American society often fails to extend grace and empathy towards black men and boys. There's this unspoken expectation that we must adhere to a standard of perfection to be accepted by others. When individuals like Clay exhibit flaws, they're subjected to relentless criticism and denigration. It's a cycle that perpetuates dehumanization. However, seeing people like Clay in the spotlight, particularly on shows like Love is Blind, is a step in the right direction. It humanizes us by acknowledging that we have flaws. We should be allowed to make mistakes, learn from them, and be forgiven just like everybody else. Yeah, absolutely, Morgan. Thanks for sharing that. Love is Blind number 94. Not my best moment. This is more of the reunion, right? So anonymous middle tier patron, she actually emailed in through the website. And by the way, I am working right now, and by the time this video is published, it should be done. I'm revamping the homepage, and also I'm adding an about page. And I'm writing about me and about the podcast development. And I'm including pictures, and it's, you know, it's comprehensive-ish, but it's also concise-ish, I would say. I imagine it would only take a couple minutes to read through. And if you want to go to the website, you can check that out. You can also email us. That's the only way to get a hold of me, really, is to email through the website. I don't really check everything else very consistently. So anonymous middle tier patron, she wrote in about this, and she says, "Hi, DKH. I was watching your video about Jeremy at the reunion, how the host returned back to our original question after Jeremy deflects." Right, so I was talking about, oh, it's really great that Vanessa is re-asking the question. And in therapy, I will tell my trainees to do that, because the first time you ask a question, particularly a difficult question, a deep question, almost always you will not get an actual response or an answer from the person. So you want to, under most circumstances, ask again. And anonymous middle tier patron is saying, I was watching you say, I find that I typically get distracted when someone deflects. How do I get better at sticking to my original point or my original question? Yeah, this is a great question. I love this question, anonymous middle tier patron. The first thing I'll say is that it's tough. It's very difficult, particularly if someone is very good at deflecting, particularly if we're hot under the collar ourselves. It's harder for us to think straight under that circumstance. But here are some tips. One is differentiation. I talk about that a lot. You can listen to my episodes on that, meaning that you need to have at least a sufficient ability to regulate your emotions, know your emotions, to know when you're starting to have adrenaline and distress and pain, because when we do that, we lose oxygen to our prefrontal cortex, which gives us the ability to think straight and stay on track. So knowing our emotions and regulating our emotions, deep breaths, everything's fine. Reassuring ourselves. This is all differentiation. Also, differentiation has to do with being goal-directed, meaning that we know what we want out of situations and seek to get to that goal. It's a funny phrase because usually we're saying goal-directed in other kinds of circumstances, like at work or something, but I hope you get the language here that Bowen put forth. Also, the more differentiated we are, the less we are going to be worried about unfair criticism and unfair rejection from other people, because a lot of deflections will involve that and will engage with that. Like you're trying to make a point. You're like, hey, that thing you did to me yesterday, that hurt my feelings. And the other person's like, well, you hurt my feelings yesterday as well. And they deflect that way, right? That's almost universal that humans do this. And we will go, oh no, I hurt my partner and they might leave me. And also I don't want to just ignore what they just said, because in order for me to get back to my point, I just have to move past what they just said, which could cause them to hate me or reject me or criticize me or leave me. You have to be able to, one, put those feelings into context. It's not likely under most circumstances that is in play. Also, if so, then screw it. Because if someone's going to leave you because you're just wanting to get some acknowledgement on one point, then it's not a relationship worth preserving, really. So differentiation, I'm just describing it in brief, but that's important. And differentiation has to do with not only understanding ourselves better and practicing, but also being able to differentiate between ourselves and other people and going through a differentiation process with our family of origin. You can Google on my channel, search on my channel for family of origin work episodes. So that's one. The other thing is to plan ahead, even if it's just like for 3 seconds. Like you are at dinner with your spouse and you're like, oh, I really want to bring up that thing that happened last week, but there's going to be a little bit of tension there. And, this could all happen pretty quickly. And I don't want to be derailed like we usually are. So I want to really make sure that I get this point across and I'm not going to allow myself to be derailed. Having that plan in advance and having some contingency plan, like if they do derail, this is what I'm going to do, because to expect us to be able to, in the moment, have a good response, particularly when we've never done that before, when we don't have practice, that's asking way too much. And even when we do try, it's going to come out real aggressive or hostile or weird or awkward, and then we're going to regret it ourselves, and we may not ever do it again because of that. So, you want to have a little bit of a plan. The other thing to do, anonymous middle tier patron, is to just say it again. It feels like rude. It feels like a rude thing to do, to just repeat the same thing over again. Like you go to your partner, say, hey, that thing you did to me yesterday, it hurt my feelings. And they say, well, you hurt my feelings like that all the time. It feels really weird to just say, well, yeah, but that thing you did to me yesterday, it hurt my feelings. It feels rude, but it's not really, because you haven't yet received any sort of actual constructive response, acknowledgement of it yet. So you just keep pressing the button. Now, maybe to grease the wheels a little bit, you vary the phrase, which brings me to another point, which is that, and I do this all the time, because clients will do this. Also, when I worked with kids, if you have kids in your life, you will frequently do things like this. You will say things like, okay, that's great. Let's table that. That sounds important. Let's get to that. But let's go back to my original point. Like if you are a teacher and you go to a teenager and you say, so it's time for you to be quiet and doing your homework. That's what everyone's, they're being disruptive. Hey, it's time for you all of us are doing our work and you're going to be just doing that. So let's do that. And the kid says something like, well, I didn't get to have lunch today, and so I'm cranky. And then you can say, okay, that's important, and I guess we can talk about that. And it's time to be quiet and do your homework. That's not a great example because that could be an actual medical thing. Like if they say, I don't know, I'm just really stressed out. I don't know. I'm not coming up with something good. It's hard for me to get back into my 13-year-old self. What would I say? I didn't really talk back. Anyway, you get my point. So there's that. Also, you want to plan ahead regarding these deflections and reassure yourself that you don't have to justify it. Now, if before you are unsure about whether or not you're justified in confronting or bringing this up, then you want to work that out. Talk with your therapist, talk with other people, think about it, whatever. But once you've established that you feel reasonable in bringing this up, and you could bring it up tentatively. You could be like, look, I don't know. This is my memory of what happened yesterday, but it hurt my feelings. I could have it wrong. All I know is that my feelings are hurt, and I don't want it to happen again, so I want to talk about it. Now, if they come back with a deflection, like, oh, here we go again, or you're always too sensitive, or you do that to me all the time. If you don't feel solid and justified, then you'll be very easily derailed because you're not confident in the thing to begin with. So you want to muster as much as it's hard for some people it's hard for any of us to be completely confident, and it's hard for others to be confident at all because of the abuse they went through. But you want to work on that so that when the time comes, you can say, nope, I've already been over this in my head. I've established that I'm justified. Now, you're not justified to assume you have a monopoly on objectivity. You're not justified in saying, I know that you said this and I know that you're a hurtful person. There's a line there. That's why earlier I was wording it that you can know and be justified in saying, I felt hurt. I know that for sure. I don't know if that hurt feeling makes any sense, but I know that I was hurt. I think it's because my spouse did this thing yesterday. I'm pretty sure that's what it is, but I'm just one person interpreting the world. I can't really know for sure, but I'm pretty sure that happened. I know that for sure, that I'm pretty sure. Okay? I'm very sure that I'm pretty sure. That's okay. You put that forth. And and I guess this is related as well, that you don't want to over justify yourself by saying, I know that this happened and I know that it's all his fault and I know that he deserves to be confronted. Because then when you do get some pushback, even if maybe the person is even bringing up some good points, one, if you stick to it, that's not fair to your spouse. And two, there's probably a part of you that's thinking, well, I don't know, maybe he's right about that. And then the whole thing just comes crumbling down. So you want to be able to stand on a very, very firm ground. And a very firm ground for us in these situations is, I know what I felt. The emotion is the important part. The emotion that you felt. Whenever, in our language, we'll say, well, I kind of feel like you were being a jerk. Okay. That's not a feeling, that's not an emotion. But it's a common enough phrase, if you ask someone, how do you feel about that? And they're like, I don't know, I kind of feel like that other person was being a jerk. Technically speaking, that's not an answer to the question, because I asked the person how they felt, what their emotion was. But it's a normal way to speak in the English language in the United States. So, I'll allow that. But when I'm saying how you feel, your emotion, you want to know what that is, and that is not debatable. I guess you could say that your memory of your feeling might be off, your emotion might be off. But either way, you had an emotion. You felt sad, you felt hurt, you felt criticized, you felt rejected, you felt worried, you felt disrespected and hurt. It's important to know the emotion. All right, disrespected is an interpretation of why one feels hurt. So as a shortcut, 99.9% of the time, if not 100% of the time, it's something related to feeling hurt or fear. So always remember that. In any circumstance, and I've said this before, but I'll say it again, this is my model, and it's not only, I didn't invent this model. It's a model of emotion that is talked a lot about emotion-focused therapy, but also in humanistic theory and also just in emotion theory and social theories. But anyway, that when we're going through some difficulty with people in our lives, attachment-wise, or even just a stranger on the bus, and things aren't going well for us, we are hurt by something, we're feeling pain. We can feel in pain about rejection. Our feelings can be hurt. When we feel disrespected, that can make us feel pain or hurt. When someone leaves us and abandons us, that can make us feel hurt. When someone doesn't listen to us, that can hurt our feelings. Or fear. When someone is cheating on us or they're texting with a former partner and you see that, you're worried that you're going to get hurt. That's another way to think about it. It's often, I guess, the bottom line, it's all about pain. At one end you got pain, at the other end you have happiness or pleasure or satisfaction or the lack of pain. And our fears are often related to fears about being hurt. So we're afraid we're going to lose our people, lose our connections, and then we will be hurt. But we could just say fear and hurt are at the bottom. And then we will get angry because of that, okay? So know that. Okay, so you go to your partner and you're like, okay, but you're thinking about it. You're like, okay, I was hurt that my husband didn't listen to me yesterday and just changed the subject. Hey, honey, that thing you did. Now you're not confused. You know the emotion. It's undebatable. There's nothing he can say that can make you say, well, maybe I wasn't hurt, or at least hopefully there's nothing he could say There's no valid way to argue against that. No one knows how you feel except for you. No one knows how you felt except for you. So that's undebatable. But it's debatable. Typically, people bring up a lot of debatable things that are not necessarily justified. Like, well, you just wanted to make the conversation about you. That's debatable. And someone will debate that if they're being accused of that. Or if you say something like, you never care about my feelings. That's why I was hurt yesterday. Again, it's debatable. It's probably not even true, right? So you want to be able to reduce down to what is objective or is at the very least unassailable. When this happened yesterday, I felt hurt. And you want to present it as such. You want to say, I know I was hurt yesterday. I don't know if I was justified. I just know I was hurt. I'm pretty sure I was justified. I know that for sure because when I was telling you about my difficult day and you changed the subject, it felt like you didn't care about my feelings. I don't know if you don't care about, but it felt that way to me. And then my feelings were hurt. Okay. So then if they tried to distract and derail by saying, well, you always do that to me, or, you're just too sensitive, or here we go again. Every time we have a date night, you always want to ruin it, or whatever. Those are pretty extreme things to say, but those derailments, you know in your heart that you didn't say anything debatable. You were hurt, and you're justified in that hurt feeling, and you did not attack your husband when you were bringing this up, and you were offering it up in a tentative. If you can do that, then you can know that it's completely justified and just basically ignoring what they just said. And just, you can even, if in a pinch, you could just even ignore, hey, honey, yesterday my feelings hurt. I don't know if I'm justified, but, when I was talking about my thing and you changed the subject, hurt my feelings. Maybe I'm being boring, or maybe I remember wrong, but I do remember that's how it felt to me. And I definitely did feel hurt, but I'm not quite sure. Can we talk about it? And then, well, you always do that to me. And you could say, okay, so you could even just say, but what do you think about what I said? Okay. Now, another thing, I said, you say, well, let's table that, because if I've done that to you, then that's awful. And if I do it to you frequently, then yes, let's address that. But first, let's get to my point. And then once you wrap up that point, hopefully, then you can say, okay, thank you. Now, what did you say? Do I do that to you? Because I don't want to do that. People almost never do this, but it's so simple. It can solve so many problems. The last thing that I have written in my notes here, just as I was looking at your comment, is you can set ground rules at the beginning. You can say, so, honey, I want to bring up something that happened yesterday that might be a little tense, not horrible, but a little tense. And I want to set a little ground rule that we're only going to talk about one thing at a time. We're not going to diverge into 10 different topics, because I feel like we both will engage in that kind of discussion style. And I feel like we bring up 10 different things and we don't resolve any of them. So I want to just talk about this one thing. It's also helpful to remind yourself to do that for yourself, so that you don't kitchen sink the person, everything but the kitchen sink. That you remind yourself, just talk about, because it's very tempting under those circumstances, like, hey, yesterday you hurt my feelings because you just changed the subject. And then your partner's just like, well, you do it to me all the time. It's very tempting to say, you do it to me all the time. In fact, last week you did it that one time, and a month ago, and your mom says that you do this to her. It's valid, but it doesn't help usually. It can be overwhelming to the person, and it adds too many variables that can be picked apart. You just want to keep it very narrow and small, especially if you have a hard time talking about this with your partner. So you're tempted to bring up, you did this to me, you're doing it right now, or whatever. I'm just going to talk about this one incident. It also makes it less weighty to the person. They feel like, oh, we're just talking about one thing? Okay, then I'm willing to take responsibility for that. But if you bring it all in, But anyway, so you can start a ground rule at the beginning. You say, hey, I just want to talk about one thing at a time. So if you bring up another topic, I'll say, let's talk about that later, but I'm going to bring it back to the original topic. If you want to talk about something else, we can after we get done talking about my thing. I'd love to hear whatever your things are about me. All right, this next comment is actually an email from listener Nicole from Vancouver. She says, hi, Dr. Honda, longtime fan of the podcast and channel. I'm working in the medical field, and I wanted to provide a correction on your comments about Amy and birth control. What Amy was saying regarding anemia was that going on the pill would have actually helped her health markers, yet she was still against hormonal contraception for the understandable reason of not wanting to alter her hormonal milieu. Any kind of blood loss, including regular periods, lowers your RBC count, RBC, red blood cell count, increasing the susceptibility of anemia, whereas hormonal contraception prevents or reduces period blood loss. Always trying to combat medical misinformation. Signing off, Nicole. Yeah, that's great. I didn't know that. That makes total sense, and that clears that up about some of my confusion about, right. So what you're saying is that Amy was actually saying, yeah, going on hormonal contraception would have actually helped because then I wouldn't have regular periods, which would help with my anemia because I would be retaining more red blood cell count. But I still don't want to go on it because I don't want to alter my hormonal milieu. At least that's what I think you're saying, Nicole. I'm not a medical professional. So Love is Blind number 95, Confronting Chelsea, is that title to that episode. Member Fish Are Friends says, I think those who don't have experience with the cycle of abuse may be really swayed by Chelsea's show of genuine contrition. But abusive cycles almost always have deep contrition as a part of the cycle. End of comment. Yeah, that's interesting. And it makes a lot of sense that when we see Chelsea have contrition, deep contrition, seemingly, I mean, I don't know if I'd call it deep contrition because she was very quick during the apologizing to point out that, well, you do it too, even though he didn't, you know what I mean, during the regular footage of the season when they were in a relationship. But yeah, the cartoonish version of an abusive narcissist that's on the internet and in TV and movies ruins it for people in that, okay, good, you're bringing up awareness of abuse and intimate partner violence and intimate partner control, but you're painting it in such a cartoonish way that almost no one will be able to detect it because actually, most people who are abusive are good human beings, moral human beings, nice people who do show remorse, might even have remorse. So there's that. Saltbox YouTube member or YouTube person, YouTube user, Saltbox House says, to answer your question, Kirk, yes, the online community thinks Jimmy was completely in the wrong for staying friends with someone he slept with. A lot of people think Chelsea was completely in the right, but I completely disagree with that. Interesting. Yeah, I asked, I'm like, where do people land? And Saltbox is saying, yeah, actually, the online community thinks that Jimmy was completely wrong for staying friends with someone that he slept with. Yeah, that's pretty disheartening to me, honestly. It's just so sad. Because case-by-case basis, look, if Jimmy and this friend of his who he had sex with in the past, and we don't even know how long ago, it could have been like 15 years ago, or it could have been last month. We just don't know. We have no idea. Also, a lot of people are saying that Jimmy talked to her throughout the day, every day. He never confirmed that to my knowledge. Chelsea was saying that, But Jimmy was doing everything in his power to move away from that topic and to just not get specific, because I think he knew that if he gets into, he's like, I don't talk to her every day, or I don't talk to her throughout every day. That's ridiculous. Well, then you're going into the topic and there's going to be more scrutiny, right? So my observation or my memory was that he just kept trying to get away from that because he didn't want her to be outed like that. And so we don't know. He might talk to her throughout every day, or he might not have. But regardless, people can have friends. And if Chelsea was uncomfortable with it, which she clearly was, then you can have a conversation about that. And I think if she would have presented it in a respectful, calm, differentiated, fair manner, I think there's a good chance Jimmy would have adjusted the relationship severely, even if it was needed to do so, because I think he was pretty dedicated to that relationship. I think his values were such that if it came down to it, he would absolutely choose his wife, right? He has this friend that he likes being friends with, but I'm quite sure that he would much more value the marital relationship and would be bummed out about losing a friend, but would do that if that's what it took. But the thing is that Chelsea never asked him. He even said that in the beginning when he first got up during that third fight when they were outside. He was like, so do you want to talk about it? Because I think he understood that there's a conversation there potentially. But she was not having that conversation, and she just kept becoming more hostile and more controlling, more abusive. And he just said, well, then I'm not going to give in out of principle, which is the right thing to do. So there's that. Also, just across the board, anyone has ever had sex with, it's impossible for you to be friends with that person and be in a fulfilling, balanced, happy, long-term, monogamous relationship with someone moving forward, or even poly, I suppose, but just a dedicated, committed relationship moving forward. In all situations, it's impossible. No. It's such a sexist, regressive, silly, childish way of looking at relationships. Really, it is. It just is. If you want to be in a culture or in a religion or a community or in a relationship where you don't do that, fine. That's you. You want to tell someone in the beginning of a relationship that's your value, that there's a hard line on that. That's a choice that you're making. But to say, in all of humankind, across all cultures in space and time, nobody could possibly be friend, or it's inherently wrong, it just screams traditional silliness, honestly. And it's really sad that people would think that. All right, moving on. Love is Blind number 98, confronting Matthew. Good old Math Pie Hanan says, as a night owl myself, I appreciate you for giving me permission to be up late with no judgment. Yeah, I was talking about the biology of circadian rhythm differences among people. And yeah, absolutely. RMH says, and also 12S Bree says, can you talk about gifted and highly sensitive people? Yeah, I'll direct people to my episode called Gifted Children. It's basically an episode about highly sensitive people. And in that episode, I basically discover that I'm on that spectrum somewhere. Moving on from Love is Blind, Last Resort. The End was the episode that I titled. Wham says, I agree that some kind of ceremony is good to, I was talking about how, would it be good if we had a ceremony at the end of a relationship or a marriage? We have all these wonderful things that happen in the beginning, but we don't have any ceremony at the end. And Wham says, I agree that some kind of ceremony is a good cleanse at the end of a relationship. In my culture, a wedding blanket is given to the couple, and if a divorce happens, it's supposed to be burned. And I think that's beautiful. Yeah. Zem says, it's amazing that you analyze Yara's culture. It's amazing when you analyze Yara's culture. It's not the same in Poland. Yara's culture isn't the same as it is in Poland, but it's very similar. Okay, sorry. Zem says it's I like hearing you talk about Yara's culture. It's not the same in Poland, but it's similar. People judge each other all the time. Many women feel they need to be perfect. So even though they are great, they still feel insecure. I hope it changes one day. Yeah, so we were observing Yara feeling very inadequate and not good enough, and also physically imperfect. That needs to be continually worked on. I was, looking at that, and we all were. And you, Zem, are like, it's kind of like that in Poland. I hope it changes one day. And yeah, well, one of the major answers is feminist activism. In my culture, feminist activism has gotten us a long way down the road. We still have a long way to go, but we don't just change our ideas about gender and about women's rights and about misogyny and sexism and all these things. We don't just naturally bend towards justice. We have to push ourselves towards justice. If we all work together, the arc will go to justice. So that is, regarding this topic, it's through feminist activism. And there have been amazing feminist activism movements within your country of Poland. Maybe you know about them. And I'm just saying this to everybody. Feminist movements in Poland before World War II, during the Cold War, after the Cold War, during the Solidarity movement in the 80s. So the women in Poland and men, everybody, if everyone works together in Poland to stop all of the mistreatment to women, including this idea that women are baseline disgusting or baseline inadequate and need to be constantly improving themselves in the eyes of men. Feminism is the answer. And people might say, well, Poland, they're more behind the United States when it comes to feminism. Well, maybe in some ways, but not in others. Like in Poland, women had the right to vote in that country before many other countries, including the United States. Poland has a tradition of feminism on the world stage. And I say all this because the term feminism has been co-opted by the red pill incel people as like this evil, ridiculous thing. They'll hold up some cartoonish exaggeration of a feminist online and say, this is what feminism is. And every time I say that, I say, well, yeah, that person's crazy. They're calling themselves a feminist, and they might be advocating for a feminist notion, but that doesn't represent me or any of the feminists that I know. None of us look like that or say shit like that. So feminism is calm and rational and powerful and right. So last resort, final thoughts. So I made a final thoughts episode, and a lot of people were appreciative of that. I want to do that more, and it's good. I didn't, it's good to be able to do that. Lauren King says, remember that one reunion episode where a Swelu got triangulated, maybe into an Angela fight, and exploded with rage? I do remember. Swelu was just like shaking with rage as like other people were fighting with each other at the reunion. I remember how you were talking about his appearance of possibly PTSD because it was such a large reaction from him. That was explosive anger. How would that fit in with passive-aggressive personality? Is it trying to avoid that massive explosion? End of comment. Yeah. Well, was this in relation to something that we saw in that episode? But I'll answer this question directly. Yeah, with passive-aggressive personality, it is rage that is expressed in a hidden way. So you think passive aggression, think hidden hostility or indirect hostility. And so they want to express, people with passive-aggressive personality, they learned they had to be this way when they were young, by the way, that they want to assert themselves, but they can't. So their assertive feelings grow and grow and grow, and they have like rage, just unbridled lifetime of rage. And they will, at one end of the spectrum, at high levels of passive-aggressive personality, they will show zero signs of this anger. Some of these folks could come across as the nicest, most kindest, most softest people on the planet, but they are just an unbridled volcano of anger that you will never see, but you will see effects of. And they will indirectly attack people by cheating or by withdrawing from you or giving you the silent treatment or talking crap about you behind your back, but doing it so well that you never know it was them that was doing it. Or they'll subtly undermine your parenting, or they might even literally gaslight you, because that's an indirect way of expressing anger. They might spread rumors about you, or they might quietly hurt your feelings and then call you crazy. Like they might, in a very cold manner, I'm trying to think of an example. Like, let's say you're married to someone with passive aggressive personality, and you come up with an agreement that you are going to, each of you is going to decide what the next vacation is going to be. I don't recommend this. I recommend everyone work together. But let's say that you have that, and you're like, okay, you decided we went to Hawaii last time. I get to decide where we're going on vacation this time, and I want to go to the Grand Canyon. And they, just one possibility, the passive aggressive partner to you will say like, well, you wanted to go to Hawaii. So in reality, we could say it was actually you that decided that we were going to go to Hawaii, not me. So in a way, you kind of got to decide two vacations. So I get to decide, and I don't want to go to the Grand Canyon. I want to go to France or something. And you're hearing this, and it's so absurd, because the reason why you even have this agreement is because of how many fights you had, that you eventually just had to say, okay, fine, you pick one, and then I pick one, and then you pick one, and then I pick one. How about that? And for them to just sort of rewrite history, and they'll do it very calmly, but deep down, they're just like emotionally sticking it to you. They're just shivving you underneath the table, just, and they know, given the history of this problem, that this is going to get you, it's going to hurt you, but they're calm about it. And then you're like, wait, so you're saying that I chose to go to, you chose to go to Hawaii. Yeah, I had a good time and I liked going to Hawaii, but you were the one that made that choice, and calmly. And so you're escalating because you're naturally emotional. You will have those natural reactions. They're having that reaction too, but it's calm. This is just one version of passive aggressive personality. And so they're getting you like, well, you talked about going to Hawaii for years. So and also I kind of feel like this whole deal of you choose, I choose, I feel like that's just kind of silly. Even though it was their idea, you get my point. It can be extremely aggravating, and it will just be that. It won't be in the general intimate partner violence, gaslighty kind of relationship style. It'll just be when I feel like you have hurt me, or I'm transferring my parents onto you, that I am going to get you, and I'm not going to tell you directly ever, and I'm never going to give you an actual chance to right the wrong. I'm always going to come at you from this other angle, and you're never going to know that it was me that did it, or it'll always feel like you were to blame, because I'm going to organize the whole thing around that. And I'm making it sound like psychopathic and Machiavellian. It's not that. It's often out of even their own awareness. Anyway, Natalia, number 14. Kindle says, I worked at CPS for years, including on the severe and sexual abuse investigations team. I would almost say that pepper spray is toward the severe physical abuse. It is just cruel. Right, so we were hearing about the mom using pepper spray on her. We consider burns severe physical abuse in Utah, like if you give your kid a cigarette burn. And pepper spray will probably leave a chemical burn. So yeah, that's pretty severe physical abuse. Makes me so sad. Yeah, well, you work for CPS, so you would know. I mean, you're the expert in that area. Vado says, as a horror movie fan, I was saying I don't like horror movies. As a horror movie fan, it makes me happy to hear that you liked Midsommar and Witch. Both movies fall into the folk horror category, which is a more sophisticated horror genre. No need for apologies. You're in the horror club. Well, I wouldn't go that far. But, okay, I'm in the folk horror club. Auntie Oz says, I would agree with Dr. Honda. I don't think they adopted her for nefarious reasons. The mom thought she could turn Natalia into another prodigy, but that was her only plan. Once that plan fell through, she was enraged by Natalia for the mom's own shortcomings. So instead of thinking that Christine herself had failed, she thought Natalia is the problem, not me. Yeah, great way of putting it, Auntie Oz. All right, well, those are all the comments that I have time for today. I want to thank everybody for commenting. I don't know when the next time I will do another one of these. I'm heading into a slower YouTube time. The only plan for a faster YouTube time will be season 7 of Love is Blind, which is reported to come out in December sometime. I'm guessing that it'll come out either beginning or mid-December. Probably would come out around, Christmas or anything, but I don't know. So I'll definitely be publishing 2 videos a day, or that's the plan anyway, for Love is Blind Season 7 in December of 2024, but, that's a number of months from now. So the plan anyway is to do, I think, just 2 reaction videos a week, maybe 3, depending, from here until there. I know that is disappointing or aggravating or bothersome to some people, but even with that measure taken, I'm still working way over 40 hours a week. But I'm able to get some chores done and maybe get some deep dives done on the audio podcast, that kind of stuff. So anyway, I'm saying all this because I don't know if I'll be making another comments video soon. I might, who knows? I kind of do it when I have the time. I want to do occasional YouTube lives, but again, I don't know when I'll do that. This is kind of an interesting period because when I first decided to do just 2 or 3 episodes a week starting in January of 2024, I didn't really have much time to figure out what I was going to do. It was only 6 weeks until Love is Blind Season 6 came out. So I spent pretty much that whole time just catching up on all these things I've been putting off for about, 4 years, and I didn't really get done doing that. So then I entered sort of what I've been telling people, sort of like my tax season. I'm an accountant, and it's like, oh, there's all these, during tax season. Well, now starts this very new work balance thing that I don't know how it's going to work. But I have high hopes that this is the model for me moving forward. And along those lines, whatever shows I'm watching between the Love is Blind seasons, I have to be disciplined not to take on too much. And I say I have to be disciplined because for a couple years now, I've been trying to do something along these lines, but I will, people will suggest, oh, you got to watch this show. And I'm like, ooh, and then I start looking into it, and then I get into it, and then I like watching these shows and reacting and posting and being in conversations with y'all. I like it, but what it ends up doing is it ends up displacing like all these other things that I should also be doing in my life. I never do content. I never make content without me wanting to do it. It's almost like it's too much of a temptation in a way for me to overwork, and then all these things start falling apart. Like, just there's all sorts of things. I won't bore you with details, but so I have to resist the temptation. It's a me thing. It's not a you thing. But we can be friends, unless our future partners say we can't. Just like, anyway. Well, that's that weird ending. Take care of yourself because you deserve it. You really, really do.